Hi everyone. Sorry for the bit of delayed start. We're having some wonderful technical difficulties to try and stress us out this afternoon. So my name is Petrina McKenzie. I'm a senior psychological wellbeing practitioner for the Let's Talk Wellbeing Leicester City Service, which is run by the Nottinghamshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. And I'm going to talk to you about becoming a psychological wellbeing practitioner. So first of all, my presentation will talk a little bit about IAPT, which is about IAPT services and what that stands for, improving access to psychological therapies, and then psychological wellbeing practitioner role, or PWP for short, and then we'll look at how you become a trainee and all the kind of things involved in that, and a little bit, some information about the application process and a few tips for improving your chances of getting through as a competitive post. Okay, can we show? Okay, so the improving access to psychological therapies started around 2008, following the report by Layard, which demonstrated that the amount through incapacity benefit payments for people experiencing anxiety and depression was far higher than it would be to actually deliver evidence-based psychological therapies. And there were 2 demonstration sites which showed the effectiveness of the step care model, which was Newham and Doncaster. And so IAPT was set up to provide access to evidence-based psychological therapies to patients experiencing common health problems within England. And this is something that didn't exist before. Mental health care and primary care was, areas had something, some areas didn't. There's lots of different types of intervention therapies being offered, but this brought together around cognitive behavioural therapy and put it in a structure, which I'm going to refer to as a step care model, which kind of allows patients to access the least burdensome intrusion, if you like, which will require the least kind of input from them, but bring about the quickest and most positive outcome for them. Can you change the slide, please? Okay, so this is the step care model, and basically it's showing that there's different types of work within IAPT. Okay, there's different levels of work within IAPT. Practitioners who work at step 2 with psychological wellbeing practitioners, and we provide low intensity guided self-help, panic, general anxiety disorder and OCD within some services, whereas step 3 practitioners provide high intensity support, so they see patients for longer, they do more in-depth work. It's more common for patients to have kind of had recurring depression or long-standing depression if they're being treated at step 3. They work with post-traumatic stress disorder, social anxiety, panic and GAD, where that's been, and OCD. So that's primarily the step care model, and that's kind of what we work to within our services. Can I have the next one, please? So, thinking about the work of a psychological wellbeing practitioner, which is what you'll be if you've completed the training, we provide high volume, low intensity cognitive behavioural therapy at step 2. Cognitive behavioural therapy, for those of you that are not familiar with it, basically looks at thoughts, behaviours and physical symptoms and how patients get stuck in certain cycles. When we're assessing a patient, we're looking at those, and we're kind of helping them and encouraging them and guiding them to be aware of what's happening in their cycle. They can break that cycle. So the assessment is very much focusing on those areas. And within the assessment, we look at risk as well and safeguarding. We also signpost services or refer to secondary care. Because we're a service that receives self-referral, patients can have all different presentations. So a service which treatment for anxiety and depression, we can find patients who refer themselves who have personality disorder, psychosis, schizophrenia are highly risky, and we work with those patients to ensure they get the best possible care for their presenting needs. PWPs, or psychological wellbeing practitioners, provide treatment. On average, that's around 6 sessions of guided self-help. We do different interventions for different, so behavioural activation and cognitive restructuring. Much more, well, behavioural activation is for depression. Cognitive restructuring can be for depression or anxiety, exposure, work, worry time, anxiety management, psychoeducation around panic, sleep hygiene, problem solving. There's a whole host of interventions that we can do with patients, and it just depends on their clinical presentation and what their kind of thinking is and what they target, what they want to work on as well. Clinical hours are split between us, but we are high volume, high caseload, so you can find you're working with 30, 32 different people per week. And the amount of assessment and treatment you do will vary depending on service need. Providing you case management, basically discussing the treatment pathway, and also delivering clinical skills, which is basically weekly sessions to kind of develop and improve your skills as a. Can I have the next slide, please? So, one back, please. At least not me pressing the buttons today. Go one back, please. So, being a practitioner, the best. Well, every day and every patient is always different, okay? And within mental health services, as it was pointed out earlier, and it always brings a new set of, you're always learning and growing, you're always developing those interventions and making them accessible to that patient that you're working with, and putting them across in a way that is understandable and meaningful for that patient, so that they can engage with the work that you're doing together. It's very much a journey together. Within low intensity cognitive behavioural therapy interventions, we very much kind of guide and empower that patient to gain an insight into what's kind of creating their low mood or anxiety and support them on their road to recovery. There are lots of different ways of delivering the step 2 treatments. Before COVID, we did do quite a bit of face-to-face work, but not at the moment, okay? Maybe again soon, that would be nice. But we do a lot of telephone work. We also use an online platform called Silver Cloud, where we work with patients to develop their skills and knowledge around different CBT interventions, and they can go away and practice those in their own time, and they can access that 24/7. So that's really useful for patients. Do lots of group work, again, not face-to-face at the moment, but we're doing lots of stuff on Microsoft Teams. So I can use a computer occasionally. And we're running stress management groups online at the moment, and a COVID anxiety mood course as well. So there's lots of different ways to develop your skills, to develop yourself further and become a champion for different things like the service user forum, digital, like that. And as it grows, we always encourage our PWPs to kind of develop their skills, look at supervisor training and things like that. But the best bit about being a psychologist is about being a part of that patient's recovery and seeing that patient and improve and no longer feel low or down or anxious. And that's the best bit. That's the most rewarding part of the job. So life as a trainee. So what can you expect? Well, training includes attending university to complete the low intensity psychological interventions course, and it postgraduate level. So that does mean if you don't have a degree, don't be put off. Okay, you can access training, and we encourage all life this as a career, because we're looking at experience and knowledge. So don't be put off if you don't have a degree. There's 3 modules you work through: assessment, treatment, values, diversity and context. So you go to university 2 days a week and you're in a service 3 days. If I want to be paid at band 5. And what you learn at university, we complement that in service with the kind of work we get you to do to support you to gain your confidence to then start working with patients and assessing and treating patients as you gain that knowledge and confidence. Something to bear in mind if you want to apply: normally we put out job adverts around May or June for a September cohort, or December for March intake. Competition is seriously fierce. when we put the job up at the end of May, it was up for 2 days, and we already had 250 applications from that. Really, you need to really consider and think about making your application really stand out, and that's what I want to talk to you about next. Can I have the next slide, please? So, if you want to be a PDOP and a trainee PDOP, you need to gain some experience really for that application form. Because so many people apply, you really need to stand out and show that you've thought about this type of role and it's something that you actually feel that you can do and want to be part of. So looking at maybe working for Samaritans or Mind or some other kind of counselling organisation, support organisation like that would stand you in really good stead. And it also will give you that opportunity to think about whether you actually want to work in this area and whether you feel it's the right way for you. Before read the literature, okay? I've got some slides in a second, which you'll see, which got some really good websites on it. Really reach out guide, because that is very useful. It talks about everything in a lot of detail in terms of how to do an assessment, all the kind of treatment, and that will help you, and it will show that you've kind of read up about yourself and how of this looking for. Target driven, okay, something to bear in mind. It's very fast paced, so have a look at the literature and prepare for the potential to need to do a role play at your interview. Lots of trainee interviews will involve a role play. We're not looking for you to do a PDOP assessment. What we're looking for is that you can demonstrate empathy, really good listening skills, that you can develop a good relationship with that other person who's paying the patient, that you're asking nice open questions, that you're kind of really developing that therapeutic relationship, because those skills are difficult to learn if you don't already possess them. So that's what we're looking for. And it might sound silly, but the number of applications that I looked through recently where people, you can see that they work in certain areas, but they just didn't relate their experience to the job specification. And if you don't, you won't score. And if you don't score, you get an interview, because there are just so many people applying. So really kind of to account with your applications. And the last thing I would say is really consider the impact on your well-being. Have a real good think about whether this is the area you want to work in, because listening day to day to find different patients and their experiences, and assessing patients who may present with risk or safeguarding issues, and talk about things that can be quite distressing. It's really worth thinking about whether you're someone who can shut off from that and can leave that to one side, and it's not going to kind of impact the way you feel. Kind of thinking about the resilience you have, because it is something that with this type of work. It's a great role, and within the Leicester team, there's a lovely team, very encouraging, motivating, and it's a lovely place to work. So my last slide for you just has a whole list of different websites that you can go to have a look at more, to find out information about being I missed one. That's the next one. Before I finish and get to that bit, I was always too eager. A little bit more about the progression with an IAP. So once you've qualified, there's other roles you can go into with an IAP. So you can then go on to be a senior psychological wellbeing practitioner like myself, and case manage PDOPs, trainee PDOPs, and ensure that we're kind of looking after their wellbeing. We also hold a caseload of our own and run our own clinical stuff as well. But also we look at all the kind of targets and the recovery rates and monitor those, and provide feedback for various meetings and things like that to ensure that we're working to the correct standards and we're providing a good, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. You want to provide a service that you'd want one of your nearest and dearest to go to. That's what we're looking for. Also, the opportunity after a couple of years of working as a paediatric training, where you can become a high intensity therapist and work at step 3. So there's lots of scope, and it's a really great area to work in. Every day will always be different, and there'll always be challenges. So these are the resources here for you to kind of have a look. I could post them on the chat as well, and check those up yourself. So I think we're going to wait for questions till later when George has finished his.
Hi everybody, first of all thank you for letting me speak for you today. As Jono said, I'm George and I'm currently coming towards the end of my second year of study at Liverpool John Moores University, where I'm on the paramedic science degree course, which is 3 years long. I'm going to try and give, it's going to be brief, it's only a short session, but a bit of an insight today into the application process to studying paramedic science, sort of the realities of the course, the ins and outs, and some of the opportunities that are available both as a student and once you've qualified. I think it's important to consider the paramedic profession in the context of other healthcare professions. Definitely, perhaps more than others, it's a very public-facing profession. You know, we're often seen driving around in the ambulance or even treating patients in the public. And hopefully throughout the course of the presentation, I'll be able to demonstrate that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, be it through education, research and specialist roles that paramedics can now work in. You know, there's an awful lot more out there for a paramedic than simply working on a normal road ambulance. Can we have the next slide, please? Cheers. So the main question is, what is a paramedic? And this is a question that's definitely changed throughout the years and what's expected of paramedics. Obviously, my opinion might be subject to some level of bias, but I do believe it's one of the most exciting areas of healthcare at the moment. And by exciting, I don't necessarily mean, you know, it's all about flying around with blue lights on and rushing through the traffic, as perhaps Holby City might have you suggest. But it's very exciting in terms of the way the profession is developing at the moment, and how far it's come in the last few years and the direction in which it's going. And one of the main organisations that's been sort of key and fundamental to helping that development is the College of Paramedics. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I definitely think that's the case with the graphic shown on the presentation in front of you. Each of the people on the picture is actually a registered paramedic. We've got a gentleman on there who's a trainee advanced practitioner within a hospital, people working within the military, the private sector, in universities, and a whole host. And I think that really demonstrates that, you know, your paramedic registration really can lead you down a huge range of avenues. So to become a paramedic, I say, you know, there's a lot of words needed to describe the skill set, but essentially you need to be dynamic and adaptable, and a really multi-skilled practitioner. So if we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So if it's something that you're interested in, then the first thing you need to do is obviously get yourself onto the course. It's the standard way in for, I imagine, most of the people who are watching today would be through university, through a 3-year degree programme in paramedic science, which is what I'm doing at the moment. You apply for that through UCAS like you would any other university course. But I think unique to not just paramedic science, but healthcare courses in general, is that you're almost guaranteed to need to do an interview. It's similar to what Petrina was saying about her profession. You know, it is quite competitive. There's a lot of people that are applying for places at university, and you need to be able to whittle that number down. So the interview is one of the main aspects of the application process. And key to having a good interview is having good experience. So if we can have the next slide, please. So one of the things that I found quite confusing before I started the course was when people talked about experience. I came into paramedic science straight from sixth form, so, you know, a sixth form college leaver who was just doing my A-levels, and a lot of people said, oh, you've got no life experience and you lack certain skills and experiences that somebody who's slightly older might have experienced. And to be honest, that's a load of rubbish. The main thing is that anything can be a useful experience. Obviously, healthcare experience is preferable and it is useful when you are applying to university for a health course. But if you've done, you know, a Saturday job where you've been facing customers, if you've got a hobby that shows some commitment, you know, sporting or anything like that, or even some of your personal experiences, they can all be used to show in the interview that you possess possess the qualities that will make you a good paramedic. I think that's one of the main things to remember, is that once you arrive for that interview, they're not expecting you to already be a paramedic. So you haven't got to know how to mobilise somebody with a spinal injury or treat somebody with red flag sepsis. They want you to have the basic characteristics and the building blocks of being honest and caring and compassionate and showing that you're hardworking, and they can then build you into a good paramedic off the back of that. So any experience that people have can be used, and definitely don't be intimidated by what other people have done. So as you can see on this slide, if you've got through the interview and you've been offered your place on the course, it's now September, fantastic, you're about to start. What's actually installed? It's definitely, like I'd imagine most healthcare courses, it can be challenging without a doubt, and it'd be unrealistic to say that it isn't often challenging, but it's also an extremely rewarding course to study, and there's a lot of interesting aspects. As you can see on the image on this screen, that's some training we did last year, and that was organised by one of our lecturers. I think it's important to point out that, it isn't all like that. We do a lot of dealing with sort of mental health and acute care, and some minor injuries and illnesses that you perhaps don't see so much on the television when you're watching something paramedic related. But equally, we do some of the exciting stuff, and it really is a very dynamic course to study. The only way I've ever described it when I've been asked out on placement is, if somebody says, what's it like, then I've said, it's a privilege to study on the course. I think it's quite unique to the paramedic profession that we are allowed into people's homes and into people's lives at the worst points in their lives, and there's a fantastic amount of trust that's placed on us to do that. One of the main things about our course is the placement. Again, I'd imagine most healthcare courses have a certain level of placement, but unique to the paramedic course is the variety that we see in our clinical placements. I know that, as a paramedic, we see people from all different backgrounds, from a range of ages and with a range of conditions, and our practice placements definitely need to reflect that. Essentially, for anyone who doesn't know what placement is, it's a chance to work within the clinical environment as a student. So there's no responsibility on you to fulfill a certain task necessarily, but you're there to soak it up and to learn and to practice your specific skills. And in my opinion, placement's one of the best bits of the course. It's a great opportunity to apply what you've learned in university to the real world and to get a feel for the job that you'll be doing. Again, placement can be a challenge, and you're working full-time hours. It can be difficult for people who've got children, perhaps, to arrange childcare for the shifts and to the travelling involved. But equally, that's sort of what you're going into by a career as a paramedic. Can we have the next slide, please? So some of the opportunities as a student, again, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I think that some of these images really do, they demonstrate some of the best opportunities I've had so far as a student. I think it's worth pointing out as well that I am only second year, so in regards to my whole career, I'm definitely still a baby, but I've already had the opportunity to do some fantastic things. 3 of the images on there were taken in Uganda last year, where me and a few other student paramedics got to travel. So even though we're only first year and obviously we're very limited in our experience and our clinical knowledge, we got to spend a couple of weeks working in a hospital there, which was really, it was a once in a lifetime and a once in a career opportunity, but it was massive in helping me to appreciate what it's like to work in the NHS and how lucky we are, to have the healthcare system that we do in this country. There's a lot of opportunities there if you look for them. If we just go back to the previous slide, please. Thank you. I think one of the main things that I learned when I started the course was that you've got to ask for opportunities, and there's a lot out there if you look for it. last year I was fortunate enough to attend the anaesthesia, trauma and critical care, or ATTACK course for anyone who's heard of it, which is quite a globally renowned course with people travelling from around the world to practice, out of hospital care on a great scale. And I was obviously fortunate enough to experience that as a first year student, which was a really great opportunity. And the only reason I was able to do that was through getting in touch with the organisers and sort of saying, is it possible to observe? And if you don't ask for opportunities, then you don't get them. And I think that's definitely one of the main things to consider is, the world is your oyster on a course like this, as long as you're willing to push yourself forward. The other image is of the helicopter. I had to get that in there somewhere. That's from some mountain rescue training we did earlier this year. My practice educator on my ambulances is a member of the mountain rescue team, and he introduced me to that quite early on. And obviously it was something that I was interested in, and I'm now training to become a fully qualified mountain rescue team member. And again, that's something that I've only been able to do off the back of being a student paramedic. It's something that I didn't know existed before I started the course, and I think it's testament to some of the things that you can end up doing. Hanging out helicopters at the weekend is something quite unique to studying a course like this. Next slide, please. Obviously, I'm fairly limited to what I can say about opportunities as a paramedic, mainly because I'm not actually a registered paramedic yet. But from what I've seen so far, there's a great scope to work both within the NHS, but also the private sector or overseas, or even within the military and that sort of organisation. As I said before, the paramedic profession has developed an awful lot in the last few years, and the education level has risen to an extent that paramedics are now able to specialise in different areas, be that as an advanced care practitioner in a GP surgery, or as a critical care paramedic responding to some of the most seriously ill and injured people within a certain region. And obviously through applying to study paramedic science and gaining the standard degree, you're then open to go and study further in the future, be that through a master's or PhD study. You continue to develop yourself both clinically and personally, and to pick a specific career path. A quick talk through some of the images on that screen. The top left is some training I did last year with the hazardous area response team with the trust. Every single ambulance service in the country has a heart team, as they know, and they are essentially delivering paramedic level clinical care to patients in hard to access and challenging environments. There's also the air ambulance there, which is another avenue which I'm quite interested to follow, and it's available for paramedics now. And I can assure everyone that isn't a real train crash. That was one of the scenarios at last year's ATTACK course. And again, to be a first year student and to have the opportunity to be witnessing that level of care being delivered was a real privilege, and one of the opportunities that has opened up through being a student. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. So I suppose the main question is, should you apply to study paramedic science? I'd say that if you answer yes to any of the questions on the screen, then I would definitely consider it. Without a doubt, it can be a challenge, and you will see things that other members of the public perhaps wouldn't in a normal job. But equally, you will see some incredible things, and it is a real privilege to do this job, where we are, in the ambulance services especially, you're out in the community, you've been trusted to go into people's homes and workplaces, and you're often the first point of call in terms of the health service that people sort of get in touch with. So whilst yes, it can be a challenging course to study both academically and practically with the placements, it's a very rewarding course. And one thing that I hadn't anticipated before I started was the sense of sort of family you get through, my friends at university and the people that you will meet through your practice placements, both in and out of hospital. It's a really great career and great profession to go into. And I'd say that that's definitely the case with the wider healthcare service. If you choose to pick another healthcare career path, then you're going to have that same sort of sense of reward. Can we have the next slide, please? I'm aware, obviously, that we're on quite a short timescale here, and I don't want to carry on waffling on. It isn't massive amount of time to cram, you know, a whole university journey into. So obviously we will take some questions in a minute, but if anyone has got any questions, then please feel free to get in touch on Twitter. I will try my best to point people in the right direction and answer if I can. But thank you very much for listening, and all the best in your future careers.
Lovely. Thank you both so much for speaking. We've got another 5 more minutes, if you guys are happy to stay around, just in case there's any more questions. But to our audience members, if you guys have got any questions about becoming a psychological wellbeing practitioner or student paramedic, this is probably the best time to ask your questions. So we've got one for Petrina that says, what's the day-to-day life of a PWP like?
Well, it's busy, and it's likely to be filled with a mixture of treatments and assessments. Pre-COVID, you would have had a clinic, possibly in a GP surgery or a Sure Start or community venue or somewhere like that. We do most of our assessments on the phone, so it'd be a bulk of time on the phone. It's very, very fast-paced. You will speak to up to 10 different patients per day if you're just doing a day full of treatments, which is a half-an-hour session. If you're doing assessments, it would be an hour. But every day, it brings so many different challenges, and every day is always different, because patients, no matter if you have 1, 2, 5 different patients who are depressed, there's so many different reasons why, and there's so many different ways of them describing that low mood and how it impacts on them. And it's just amazing to be part of their recovery journey more than anything, and supporting them in feeling that they're being listened to, because for lots of people they felt so isolated, and just the opportunity to talk with a PWP is something that helps them, give that opportunity to offload and feel that they're really listened to. Because if you think about it in life, how many times does someone actually really listen to you for an hour? They're always on their phone, or they're distracted, or they're doing something else. But for someone to really listen to you and your experiences, so patients are, you know, find that really, really useful and supportive. But every day as a PWP is always different, and there'll be risk, and there'll be safeguarding, and all sorts of dramas and things like that. But we're there to support those patients, and we're always very calm and focused and supportive and all of those things, but it will be busy.
Questions, Zena, and thank you, Petrina, for answering. George, we've got a couple of questions for you. The first 2 are from the same person. So how do you work as a paramedic on the helicopters? And also, is there a physical fitness standard that needs to be achieved prior to entry?
Obviously, I can't say too much because I'm not an air ambulance paramedic. You'd follow a specialist training pathway down that route. It depends which trust you work for. So as a newly qualified paramedic, you'd work for a normal ambulance service on a road ambulance, and they have different pathways, but generally you would follow the training pathway to become a critical care paramedic, which usually involves a master's degree in that topic, and a number of years of obviously practical on the job training, where you'll be working with other critical care paramedics and doctors who work on that platform. It's something to look into. If you Google any of your local air ambulances, I'm sure there's more information on there. But it's changing all the time, to be honest. And for the fitness standards, you don't have a fitness test to get into university. As far as I'm aware, that's the case with all the universities. I believe that most ambulance services do have a form of a fitness test. However, I don't think it's particularly strenuous. It's just to know that you're safe to, do the lifting and handling and use some of the equipment we use, which can be quite heavy. And again, we work out in the community, we can be carrying that up a train track, up a flight of stairs to the top of a block of flats. The lifts always seem to be conveniently broken when you've got your heavy equipment. So fitness-wise, I think it's just a general level of fitness to know that you're safe to do the job.
Thank you. The next question I'd like to direct to both of you, just so that everyone in the audience can kind of find out. What are kind of the entry requirements, and what kind of things should you possess in order to become into your profession?
Petrina, go first.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay, so like I said, you don't need a degree. It's helpful to have a psychology degree or a background in psychology in terms of A-level interest, showing an but you don't have to. Like I said, the voluntary experience, gaining that will stand you in better stead. So if I see an applicant who's got a master's in psychology and a degree in psychology, all wonderful, sparkling, but haven't done any kind of voluntary work, they would not beat the person who's done the voluntary work. Yeah, if that makes sense, because like the person who's engaged with people, the person who understands what that kind of work is like, they're more likely to get into an interview over the person who's just gone to university. University is wonderful and great and brilliant and done that, but to work with patients in this way, we're looking for someone who can engage with patients and develop that relationship, and someone who's caring and compassionate, not someone who can use SPSS.
From a paramedic perspective, entry requirements, again, you know, I talked about the education changing over time. There are routes into becoming a paramedic through the ambulance service directly, where you can work as an emergency medical technician. And after a number of years experience, you can do a sort of a quicker course over a year to become a paramedic. But I think the standard route in for most people, and indeed for myself, is the 3-year degree program, which is now becoming the standard. It was previously a 2-year diploma, but it is now going up to a standardised 3-year degree across the whole country. To get onto the degree, it's normally 112 to 120 UCAS points, or it was when I applied a couple of years ago, which was about BBC or BBB at A level. Obviously, some universities require higher entry requirements than that, and some slightly lower, but that's about the average. And you can also get in with BTEC qualifications as well as A levels.
Lovely. Thank you, George. So there's a few questions regarding paramedic science. First one's about the university experience and kind of how many people are in your class and how many people are in your university.
Yeah, the courses, again, I can only speak on behalf of my cohort in my university. I believe that there's about 50 of us in our cohort, but the year that we applied, as far as I'm aware, there was about 2,000 applicants. So, you know, they really did have to whittle that down to quite a small number. So it's quite a small group. And then when we do practical sessions, we'll be in groups of sort of between 5 and 10, obviously not at the moment because of COVID. The uni experience, you can definitely still get that. And I think it's a sort of course where it depends what you want. I still live at home and complete my placements a bit closer to home, whereas you can still live in student halls. And, you know, whilst you have got to do practice placements, and there's a bit of a higher workload than perhaps a normal course because of that, you're essentially fitting, you know, a whole degree plus a year and a half's worth of placement into 3 years. But there's definitely still time to experience the university life. Yeah.
2 more questions, if you guys have the time. So penultimate one is, do you need an advanced driving proficiency to become a paramedic?
Yeah, if you have a look on the university websites, you will require a provisional C1 driving category on your licence. To get this provisional, you don't have to do a test or anything like that. You will have to have a medical and an eyesight test so that you can get that provisionally put on your licence. And then when you become a paramedic, or before becoming a paramedic, you will need to go through an advanced theory test and an advanced driving test to enable you to drive, have a C1 category, which effectively allows you to drive a large goods vehicle. And that all just goes off the weight of the vehicles that we're driving, the emergency ambulances. So it's something to have a look at on the university website and the DVLA. And if in doubt, get in touch with the admissions team. I'm sure they'll be happy to point you in the right direction.
Perfect, thank you. And the final question is, what experience or voluntary work could young people do to help with their application in becoming a paramedic?
I say it varies, and you can definitely use whatever you've got. I struggled myself coming straight from sixth form. I hadn't had years of experience in a specific setting. I hadn't done, some people have already been working in the ambulance service at a lower level than a paramedic for years, or in a hospital, whereas I hadn't done that. I managed to get a couple of work experience placements in the operating theatres at my local hospital. So obviously that's a different environment to the ambulances, but you can still demonstrate teamwork and time management and the caring, etc., values that it needs to become a good paramedic. But also, if you've had a job through sixth form or college where you've been facing customers, perhaps, or if you've got sporting achievements or a hobby that requires commitment, or indeed, personal experience. If you've cut your neighbour's lawn every week for the past 8 years, then that shows a level of dedication. So anything you've done can definitely be used to show that you've got those sort of those compassionate and caring values. If you Google the 6 C's, the NHS 6 C's is sort of the main basis that you want to have as a person in terms of the values that you hold personally. And I'm sure you can find a lot of ways to sort of word your experiences to suit that prior to interview.
Thank you, Petrina and George, very much for speaking to our future PWPs and paramedics. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to be very influential. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your summer.
Cheers. Thank you.
So when you guys are ready, if you just press the leave button, that should exit you from the platform. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya. Cool. So if you just press leave and then the red leave, I think you have to press it twice if it loads. Cool. Right, that's it, guys. There might be a couple more expos going on or sessions. I would recommend having a quick look, and don't forget to come down to our disco at 6:30. See you guys there.